Well, it has been an especially quiet week in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. The government is still shut down by a feeble-minded infant who wants his toys. I suppose if there's an upside, it is that people are working once again. They're just not getting paid. And that lack of economic activity, the cash that usually flows through our economy, isn't getting out there the way it has been. People aren't buying things the way they did just a scant month ago. And that's hurting businesses, and that's hurting people. The only people that haven't been hurt are Donald Trump and nonprofit organizations. Donald Trump hasn't been hurt because he's a bottom-feeding troglodyte whose only concerns don't extend any further than the end of his rotting, distended penis, which is maintained through an intricate series of prostitute payoffs and Lindsey Graham. Which leaves us with the nonprofits, what most people know as charities. And to be honest, charity is really something I don't want to talk about. I like to keep the topics of these shows as light and open to my sense of humor as I can. There's nothing funny about charity, nothing light either. We know this because there's not a single one of us who has not in some way been touched by charity. Even if you've only seen that Sarah McLachlan spot for the SPCA, which, if you have, you probably didn't see it just once. And my sympathies to you. The topic of charity is nuanced and delicate. And, well, you remember that bit about Donald Trump's penis just a minute ago? Yeah, I don't exactly do nuanced or delicate. But, just for this week, I'll try. When I talk about charity, I'm not talking about that feeling of empathy we experience, that act of giving of ourselves to another so that they won't suffer. That's fine. That's to be commended. That kind of charity is good. I think we can all agree on that. It's the other kind of charity that causes us problems, and causes them unnecessarily. That kind of charity is what so many of us have read about in the past week, with restaurants providing free food for furloughed government employees who can't afford to feed their children or even themselves. It's the kind of charity Sherry Finn has turned down every time she has torn up a correspondence from the Las Vegas Mass Shootings Victim Fund. The kind old Herbert has refused from churches who open their doors to people like him. The kind our veterans have to rely on far too often. The kind our fellow citizens have to rely on when they lose their homes. I'm talking about Big C charity here. I know many of my fellow citizens have been helped by charity. Some have been saved by charity. Some are only still alive thanks to the generous assistance of charity. And there's really no way to object to charity without sounding like the worst kind of asshole. Having established that for the trolls out there, allow me to dovetail for just a minute before getting back to the topic of charity, as I think this will help make my argument for me. Imagine, for just a moment, that our government was fully funded. Now, it's possible that you may not be aware that our government isn't fully funded, that budgets haven't been slashed, and services haven't been cut year after year, decade after decade. It is possible that you weren't alive the last time we had a fully funded government. I can understand if that's too much to imagine in the face of a U.S. government that isn't open for business, that a Russian agent isn't delighting in shutting it down and keeping it closed, that it hadn't been stripped down to its bones after decades of republicanism. But still, I ask you to try. Imagine that our government was fully funded, that our Veterans Administration had all the funds it needed to adequately care for our vets. And by this, I don't just mean that they would supply second-rate medical care if you're willing to wait that long. No, I want you to imagine a VA that cared for the sick and housed the homeless, that fed the poor veteran who didn't have enough to eat, that counseled the veteran suffering from PTSD or from any of the emotional scars that come with whatever their experience might be. The mission statement of the VA reads, "To fulfill President Lincoln's promise to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, by serving and honoring the men and women who are America's veterans." It says nothing about nickel and diming vets so as to better line the pockets of the richest, both American and otherwise. Right? So, imagine a fully funded VA. Imagine a fully funded HUD, which is the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Housing is their core focus, their primary goal. Imagine a HUD that housed the homeless. I mean, if you can. Imagine a HUD that saw to the comfort of our aged, made sure they were adequately housed. Now, imagine a fully funded Department of Education that taught all of our children facts. I know I'm asking a lot. Imagine a fully funded FDA that actually kept our food safe and kept us safe from our food. You know what food I'm talking about. Imagine a fully funded EPA whose interest, contrary to what we have now, was in maintaining the planet so that it remains habitable for human life. You see, every year that the Republicans cut our government, every year they shrink it to the point where you could drown it in a bathtub, to quote a famous Republican strategist, asshole, is another year more people must rely on charity. It's another year our fellow citizens, fellow human beings, mothers and sons and cousins and neighbors fall through the cracks. It's another year they and we are forced to put our hands out and beg. And who wants that? I mean, really. We're all encouraged to give to charity, but you never hear someone encouraged to take from charity. Because when they do, they are called takers. They are called worse. They're referred to as a burden on our economy. Republicans talk about makers and takers, and you can bet that the takers they refer to are not the same people donating to their re-election committees. No, the takers Republicans refer to are you and me. They are our brothers and sisters who are hurting from an economy not built for their survival. They are our aunts and uncles who must beg for medical care or go without. They are our friends who have to set up GoFundMe pages just to go to school, just to have a roof over their heads, just to be buried. Charity is a fine thing when it works both ways, but ours doesn't. And still, you can bet that all that money that gets donated goes somewhere. Want to guess where it goes? I'd say that churches and political action groups are a good place to start. And the thing is, none of this is necessary. We can have a society where we look after one another, but we have to stop being played for fools. Republicans are only in it for themselves, and they want you to only be in it for yourself. Greed is that thing that asks, "Why should I have to pay for roads I don't drive on?" Or, "Why should I have to help homeless people?" Greed says, "I take care of my own first," and then doesn't even do that. Our society, warped by Republican greed, has taken a welfare state and turned it into a charity state. And you don't qualify. Would you rather rely on charity, or would you rather be guaranteed services by a government that honors all citizens? Because that's what it comes down to. As Americans, we can choose between what we see as our right or what we see as someone else's charity. The rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness were not ours until we claimed them as a nation. And no one should ever talk about American exceptionalism unless the hungry have a right to food, and the cold have a right to a warm bed. Yes, these two and more. And if I may, for just a second, why wouldn't you want a service being provided to you to have a complete budget? What sense does that make? Would you eat at a restaurant that didn't have the budget for a dishwasher? Would you go to an auto mechanic who couldn't afford tools? No, that doesn't make any sense. Would you fly Southwest Airlines if they told you they couldn't afford wings? No, you wouldn't. I don't care if their rates are low. The thing is, you don't want underfunded or criminally not funded government. You want efficient government. You want a clean government. Okay, but do that. Make government better. Clean it up if possible, but stop shortchanging yourself with less than you deserve. Republicans will tell you that if you demand services from your government, that's somehow an entitlement, that you're not entitled to the benefits that come with citizenship, or even the benefits that come with being a fellow human being. But that's only because they want that money for the really entitled. They're entitled donors and lobbyists. In this fight, it's everybody or nobody. Either we lose by allowing the wealthiest among us, wealthy only in money they have stolen off the backs of our fellow citizens, to convince us that we're not worthy of a functioning government, or we can win by standing behind the ideals our country is supposed to stand for, by defending the rights so many of us have fought so hard for, by refusing to back down when they tell us to. Right now, fellow citizens, hard-working Americans are going hungry, losing their homes, and failing to get necessary medical treatment because of a Republican Party that has stripped even working Americans of their rights. And we need to stop being afraid of them. We need to stand up and tell them in an irresistible voice, no. Until we do, we will remain at the mercy of charity. Charity approved by our government. Charity that provides only what they are told they can provide. Charity that has no connection with that empathy we feel for others. Charity that keeps us from the government and from the life we deserve. And that's it from DC. As with the rest of the world, until next time, be good to yourself, be kind to others, and let's make this world a better place.